touch me and I'll kill you, or have you forgotten how it was in prison?
The entire villa went silent. Not because of the screaming. Not because of the shattered vase on the marble floor. But because the new maid did something no one had ever dared. Under the glittering Venetian chandelier, Signorina Valentina Morosini stood with her hand raised high, ready to strike again. Her long dark hair swung with the force of her fury. Her pink designer dress hugged her curves like armor. Her diamond bracelet caught the light as her palm prepared to descend. Every servant froze. The cooks near the kitchen doorway stopped breathing. The gardeners who had come inside to escape the heat pressed themselves against the walls. The butler near the archway clutched his silver tray like a shield. Even Nonna Gia, the elderly head housekeeper who had worked at Villa Castellani for 40 years, lowered her eyes and said nothing. They all knew what came next. Valentina always slapped someone when she was angry. It was as predictable as the Tuscan sunrise, as unavoidable as death itself. But today, something changed. A hand shot up and caught her wrist. Not softly, not fearfully, firmly, like iron refusing to bend in a storm. It was Serafina, the new maid, a quiet woman with dark skin and natural hair pulled into a high bun. She wore the standard black and white uniform, but somehow it looked different on her. Like a soldier wearing civilian clothes. Like someone pretending to be less than they were. She had arrived only 3 days ago from nowhere anyone knew. She spoke little. She worked hard. She watched everything with hollow eyes that had seen too much. And now those hollow eyes were locked onto Valentina Morosini with something no servant had ever shown before. Defiance. Valentina's face twisted in shock. Her perfectly painted lips parted. Her eyes, usually so confident, so cruel, went wide with disbelief. No one had ever stopped her hand before. No one had ever dared. She tried to pull back, but Serafina's grip only tightened. The maid's fingers pressed into her wrist like a vice, and for the first time in her privileged life, Valentina Morosini felt what it was like to be powerless. Her voice came out sharp, incredulous. "What do you think you are doing?" Serafina did not flinch. She did not apologize. She did not bow her head and beg for forgiveness, like all the others had done before her. Instead, her voice came out low, cold, and terrifying. "Touch me, and I will kill you. Or have you forgotten how it was in prison?" Every worker in the room gasped. The cook covered her mouth. The gardeners exchanged stunned glances. The young maid who had dropped the vase, the girl barely 18 years old who had been about to receive Valentina's punishment, pressed herself against the wall and began to cry silently. But it was Valentina's reaction that told the real story. Her face drained of color. Not the pink flush of anger, but something else entirely. Something that looked like recognition. Something that looked like fear. And in that moment, everyone in the room realized the same thing. These two women knew each other. 3 days earlier, Villa Castellani had seemed like paradise from the outside. Rolling Tuscan hills stretched endlessly toward the horizon, painted in shades of gold and green. Ancient olive trees dotted the landscape like wise old sentinels guarding secrets. The mansion itself rose from the earth like a dream, all cream-colored stone and terracotta tiles and windows that gleamed in the afternoon sun. Serafina Farrow had stood at the iron gates that day, her single bag hanging from her shoulder, her heart pounding beneath her calm exterior. To anyone watching, she looked like just another desperate woman seeking employment. Another face in the endless parade of maids who came and went from the great houses of Tuscany. But Serafina was not desperate. And she had not come by accident. She had waited for years for this moment. For years of planning. For years of patience. For years of learning everything she could about this villa, about its owner, about the woman who would soon become its mistress. The head housekeeper had greeted her at the service entrance. Nonna Gia was a small woman with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun and hands that had scrubbed floors for decades. Her face was kind, but her eyes carried a weariness that spoke of things she had seen and could not forget. "You are the new girl?" Nonna Gia had asked, looking her over with experienced eyes. "Good. We need help. The last 3 maids quit within a month." Serafina had nodded politely, keeping her expression neutral. "I will not quit, Signora." Nonna Gia had studied her for a long moment, something flickering in her weathered face. Recognition, perhaps. Or maybe just the instinct of someone who had survived decades in service by learning to read people. "We shall see," the old woman had finally said. "Come. I will show you to your room." Serafina had followed her through the villa, memorizing every hallway, every staircase, every possible exit. She noted the security cameras in the main rooms. She counted the staff members. She observed which doors were locked and which were left open. She already knew why the maids quit, but she needed to see it for herself. On her first day, she saw it happen. Valentina Morosini descended the grand staircase at precisely 9 in the morning, her long dark hair flowing behind her like silk, her pink dress catching the light from the tall windows. She was beautiful in the way that expensive things are beautiful. Perfect on the surface, cold underneath. She walked into the dining room where breakfast had been laid out on fine china. The cook, a round woman named Benedetta who had worked at the villa for 15 years, stood nervously by the sideboard. Valentina picked up her coffee cup. She took one sip. Then she set it down with a sharp click. "This is cold." Benedetta's face went pale. "Signorina, I just poured it. It cannot be cold. Perhaps if you let me bring another." Valentina did not let her finish. The slap echoed through the dining room like a gunshot. Benedetta stumbled backward, her hand flying to her reddening cheek. "When I say the coffee is cold," Valentina said sweetly, "then the coffee is cold. Do you understand?" Benedetta lowered her head. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Forgive me, Signorina." Serafina had watched from the corner where she had been polishing silver. Her hands remained steady. Her face remained blank. But inside her chest, something burned. She remembered that voice. She remembered that cruelty disguised as sweetness. She remembered exactly what Valentina Morosini was capable of. And she remembered her sister. On her second day, Valentina had screamed at a gardener until he wept. The old man had trimmed a rose bush incorrectly, and Valentina had berated him for 20 minutes straight, calling him stupid, worthless, a disgrace to his profession. By the end, tears had streamed down his weathered cheeks, but he had simply stood there and taken it. Later that same day, Valentina had thrown a plate at the butler because he had brought her white wine instead of red. The plate had shattered against the wall inches from his head. He had apologized profusely while picking up the pieces with bleeding fingers. And worst of all, Valentina had cornered the youngest maid, a girl named Chiara who was barely 18 years old. She had called her worthless trash. She had pulled her hair. She had made her kneel on the marble floor for an hour because she had found a single speck of dust on a windowsill. Serafina had watched all of it. And she had said nothing. Because she was waiting. The most fascinating thing about Valentina Morosini was not her cruelty. It was her transformation. Every evening, around 6 o'clock, the front doors would open and Ermanno Castellani would return from his offices in Florence. He was tall and handsome, with kind eyes and the sort of gentle demeanor that seemed almost impossible for a man worth billions. He had built his tech empire from nothing, and despite his wealth, he remained humble, generous, beloved by everyone who knew him. Everyone except the staff who served in his home. Because they knew the truth. The moment Ermanno's car pulled into the driveway, Valentina would transform. The screaming would stop. The cruelty would vanish. The vicious tyrant would disappear, replaced by a soft, sweet, loving woman who seemed incapable of hurting a fly. "Darling," she would coo, rushing to greet him at the door. She would kiss his cheek, take his briefcase, lead him to the sitting room with her arm wrapped around his. "I missed you so much. How was your day?" And Ermanno would smile at her with such genuine affection that it made Serafina's stomach turn. He had no idea. This kind, intelligent man who could spot a bad business deal from a mile away had no idea that the woman he was about to marry was a monster. The staff would exchange glances during these moments, but they never spoke. They needed their jobs. They needed the money. And Valentina's family, the Morosinis, were powerful enough to destroy anyone who spoke against her. So they suffered in silence. But Serafina was not like the others. She had not come for money. She had not come for employment. She had not come to bow her head and survive. She had come for something far more valuable. She had come for justice. And now, standing in the grand living room with Valentina's wrist trapped in her grip, she was finally ready to claim it. Back in the present, Valentina's pink dress seemed to pale against her whitening face. "Let go of me," she hissed, her voice losing its usual confidence. She yanked at her wrist, but Serafina's grip was iron. "I said let go." The staff remained paralyzed. No one moved to help their mistress. No one intervened. Perhaps some part of them wanted to see this. Perhaps some part of them had been waiting for someone to finally stand up. Serafina did not move. Her dark eyes remained locked onto Valentina's with a hatred so pure, so patient, It seemed to have been carved from years of suffering. This was not the anger of a moment. This was the cold fury of someone who had waited a very, very long time. "You do not remember me," Serafina said quietly. Her voice was calm, almost conversational, which somehow made it more terrifying than any scream. "But you remember my sister." Something shifted in Valentina's eyes. Recognition. And with it, pure terror. "No," she breathed. Her perfect composure cracked. Her voice trembled. "No, you cannot be. Lucia Farrow." Serafina spoke the name slowly, letting each syllable hang in the air like a death sentence. "Cell Block D, 7 years ago. You let her take the blame. You let her rot. You let her die." The staff gasped. Some covered their mouths. Nanajia's weathered face had gone pale, and her hand pressed against her heart as if she feared it might stop. Valentina's knees buckled slightly. She caught herself on a nearby chair, but her legs were shaking. "That was an accident. It was not my fault. She chose to." "An accident?" Serafina's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow filled the entire room. Every word was precise. Every word was poison. "You killed a child. You blamed my sister. She died in prison because of you." The words hung in the air, heavy and terrible. And then a voice from the doorway shattered everything. "Valentina." Everyone turned. Standing in the archway, briefcase still in hand, was Ermanno Castellani. He had returned home early. His kind face was twisted with confusion as his eyes moved from Valentina's terrified expression to Serafina's steady grip to the frozen, silent staff. He had heard something. That much was clear from his face. The question was how much. "What," he said slowly, his voice dangerously quiet, "does she mean by prison?" Valentina's mouth opened. No sound came out. For the first time in her life, she had no lie ready. No sweet smile to deploy. No performance to hide behind. She stood there in her pink dress with her diamond bracelet glittering and her face the color of ash, and she had nothing. Serafina released Valentina's wrist at last. She stepped back, her expression calm, her posture straight. She looked at Ermanno Castellani with those hollow eyes that had seen too much, and she smiled. It was a cold smile. A patient smile. A smile that promised everything was about to burn. "Ask her," Serafina said. "Ask her about the night she killed a 5-year-old boy and let my sister take the fall." Ermanno's face went gray. The briefcase slipped from his fingers and hit the marble floor with a thud that echoed through the silent room. And Villa Castellani held its breath, because the carefully constructed world within its walls was about to collapse completely, and no amount of money or power or lies could stop what was coming next. Ermanno Castellani had built a tech empire worth billions by reading people. He had negotiated with world leaders in boardrooms across 3 continents. He had survived hostile takeovers that would have destroyed lesser men. He had stared down competitors, politicians, and criminals without flinching. He had never been fooled. Until now. His briefcase lay forgotten on the marble floor where it had fallen. His eyes moved slowly from Valentina's ashen face to Serafina's steady gaze, and in that moment, something shifted behind his expression. The confusion was giving way to something else. Something darker. "Valentina," he said again, his voice dangerously quiet. "What does she mean by prison?" Valentina finally found her voice. It came out high and desperate, nothing like the smooth, confident tone she usually employed. "She is crazy, Ermanno. I have never been to prison. I have never killed anyone. She is some kind of psychopath who wandered in off the street and—" "Then why?" Serafina interrupted calmly. "Did your face go white when I mentioned Cell Block D?" Silence. The staff remained frozen against the walls, watching this scene unfold like spectators at a car crash. Nanagia had pressed both hands to her heart now, her weathered face pale with something that looked almost like recognition. The young maid Chiara was still crying silently in the corner, forgotten by everyone. Ermanno walked slowly into the room. His footsteps echoed on the marble, each one deliberate and heavy. He stopped directly in front of Valentina, close enough to touch her, but he made no move to do so. "You told me," he said, "that you had never been in trouble with the law. Not even a parking ticket. You swore it to me when I asked about the background check." "I have not been in trouble." Valentina's voice cracked. Tears began streaming down her face, leaving tracks in her perfect makeup. "Ermanno, darling, please. You know me. You love me. This woman is lying. She must have some vendetta against my family. The Morosinis have enemies, you know this. Then explain." His voice cracked like a whip, and Valentina flinched as if he had struck her. Explain what this woman means. Explain why my staff looks like they have seen a ghost. Explain why you were about to hit a servant when I walked through that door." Valentina's mouth opened and closed. The tears flowed faster now, but they seemed almost rehearsed. Performative. The same tears Serafina had seen her produce 100 times before, whenever she needed sympathy, whenever she needed to manipulate someone into believing her lies. The girl broke a vase, Valentina whispered. "I lost my temper. You know how stressed I have been with the wedding plans." She was going to slap her. The words came from Nana Gia. Everyone turned to look at the elderly housekeeper, who had finally stepped forward from her place against the wall. Her voice was quiet, but steady. "She slaps the staff regularly, Signor Castellani. She has done it since the day she moved in. The cook, the gardeners, the maids, anyone who displeases her." Valentina's eyes went wide with fury. "You lying old hag. How dare you speak against me? I will have you fired. I will make sure you never work again. I will." "Enough." Armano's voice was cold. Colder than anyone had ever heard it. He turned to face Serafina, and his expression shifted from anger to something more measured. More calculating. "You. Tell me everything. From the beginning." Serafina nodded slowly. She had waited for years for this moment. She had rehearsed these words 1,000 times in her head, lying awake in her prison cell, walking the streets of Florence searching for information, standing at her sister's grave promising that justice would come. Now it was finally here. 7 years ago, she began, her voice steady as stone. There was a car accident on the coastal road outside Genoa. She did not shout. She did not cry. She simply spoke, and somehow that was more devastating than any scream could have been. Her words filled the room like smoke, impossible to escape. It was a Saturday night in September. The rain was coming down hard. A 5-year-old boy named Marco Benedetti was walking home from his grandmother's house. It was only 2 blocks. His mother watched him from the window. She saw him reach the corner. And then she saw the headlights. Valentina shook her head rapidly. "Stop. Stop talking. You do not know what you are saying." Serafina continued as if she had not spoken. A car came around the corner too fast. The driver was drunk. She had been at a party in the hills, celebrating something. A birthday, maybe. Or just another excuse to drink expensive wine and feel superior to everyone else. Armano's jaw tightened. His eyes moved to Valentina, who had wrapped her arms around herself and was shaking visibly. The car hit the boy. Killed him instantly. His mother saw the whole thing from her window. She ran into the street screaming, but by then the car was gone. It never even slowed down. "This is ridiculous," Valentina hissed. "I was never in Genoa. I do not know what she is talking about." Serafina's dark eyes locked onto hers. "You were there. You were driving your father's Mercedes. And when you got home, covered in blood, shaking with fear, you woke up your family's maid. A 19-year-old girl named Lucia Farrow. My baby sister." The room went absolutely still. "You told her there had been an accident. You told her you needed help. And because Lucia was kind, because Lucia trusted people, because Lucia believed that someone like you could not possibly be evil, she helped you clean the car. She helped you hide the evidence." She had no idea what she was getting herself into. Tears were streaming down Serafina's face now, but her voice remained steady. The grief was old, worn smooth by years of carrying it. But it was still there, heavy as stone. "And then, when the police came knocking 3 days later, you did the unthinkable. You told them Lucia was driving. You said she had borrowed the car without permission. You said you had tried to stop her, but she was drunk and reckless and would not listen." Armano's face had gone from gray to white. "Valentina, tell me this is not true." Valentina was sobbing now, great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. "It is not how she is making it sound. It was complicated. I was scared. I did not mean for anyone to get hurt. You testified against her." Serafina's voice cut through the crying like a blade. "You sat in that courtroom, looked at my 19-year-old sister, and said under oath that she was driving. You watched them handcuff her. You watched them take her away to prison. And then you went home and continued your perfect life as if nothing had happened." She agreed to it. Valentina screamed. She said she would take the blame. "My father paid her family. Our family received nothing." Serafina's voice was ice. "We were poor. We had no lawyers. We had no connections. When we tried to fight the charges, your father's attorneys buried us in paperwork we could not afford to challenge." Lucia was convicted of vehicular manslaughter. She was sentenced to 15 years. The number hung in the air. 15 years. For a crime she did not commit. She was 19 years old, Serafina continued. She had never been in trouble in her life. She wanted to be a teacher. She loved children. And you sent her to prison for killing one. Hermano grabbed Valentina's arm. His grip was not gentle. Is this true? Did you let an innocent girl go to prison for something you did? Valentina's perfect facade crumbled completely. Her makeup was ruined. Her hair was disheveled. She looked nothing like the polished, beautiful woman who terrorized the staff with such confidence. I was 22, she whimpered. I was scared. My father said he would handle everything. He said the girl would be fine. He said she would get a reduced sentence and we would pay her when she got out. But that is not what happened. Serafina reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Because word spread through the prison that Lucia had killed a child. And inmates do not forgive that. They do not care about the truth. They only care about punishment. She unfolded the paper slowly. Her hands were steady, but something in her eyes had gone distant. As if she were seeing something far away. Something terrible. They beat her. The other inmates. Again and again. The guards did nothing. They thought she deserved it. Everyone thought she deserved it because of what you made them believe. Valentina sank to her knees on the marble floor. Her designer dress pulled around her like a pink stain. I did not know. I swear I did not know what would happen to her. She died on March 15th, 4 years ago. Internal bleeding from a beating that happened 3 days earlier. She was 22 years old. The same age you were when you killed that little boy and walked away free. The paper in Serafina's hand trembled slightly. I was there when she died. I was in the same prison because after Lucia's first beating, I found you in the exercise yard during visiting hours. Your father had arranged for you to serve your sentence in a minimum security facility with day privileges. You were allowed to walk around freely while my sister rotted in a cell. Her voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. I tried to kill you with my bare hands. I nearly succeeded. They pulled me off you and added 3 more years to my sentence for assault. She held up her hands. In the light from the chandelier, faint scars were visible across her knuckles. Old wounds. Permanent reminders. I served my time. 3 years for assault, 2 more for the false charges your family added to keep me quiet. And every single day I planned this moment. She held out the folded paper to Hermano. This is the original police statement. The one Valentina gave before her father paid to have it destroyed. The one where she admitted she was driving. My brother is a lawyer. He spent 6 years tracking it down. Hermano took the paper with shaking hands. He unfolded it slowly, and as his eyes scanned the words, his face transformed into something unrecognizable. Grief. Rage. Betrayal. You. His voice cracked. You told me you had never broken a law in your life. You told me your family's reputation was spotless. You told me. I was going to tell you. Valentina crawled toward him on her knees, reaching for his legs. I was going to explain everything before the wedding. I just needed time. I just needed you to love me enough that you would understand. Understand. The word came out like a gunshot. You killed a child. You destroyed an innocent girl's life. You lied to me every single day for 2 years. What exactly was I supposed to understand? And then Nanagia spoke again. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried through the room like thunder. Madre di Dio. The old woman's face had gone the color of chalk. Her hands were shaking violently. You are the one who killed Signora Castellani too, are you not? The room went utterly silent. Hermano released Valentina so suddenly she fell backward onto the marble. He spun toward the housekeeper, his eyes wild. What did you say? Nanagia was crying now, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. 2 years ago. The car accident on the cliff road. I saw her come back that day, Signor. Her hands were scratched. Her dress was torn. And she was muttering something to herself. What was she muttering? Hermano's voice was barely human. The old woman's next words made everyone's blood run cold. She said, the old woman is finally quiet. She will not ask any more questions. Valentina screamed. You lying old witch. You are making this up. Hermano, she hates me. She has always hated me. She is conspiring with this criminal to destroy our happiness. But Hermano was not listening anymore. He was staring at the woman he had planned to marry, and for the first time, he was seeing her clearly. The mask had fallen away completely. My mother, he whispered. You killed my mother. Serafina reached into her pocket one more time. I have one more piece of evidence, she said quietly. A recording. From your old cellmate, Valentina. The one you used to drink with in the minimum security wing. The one you bragged to when you thought no one important was listening. She held up a small phone. Her thumb hovered over the play button. Would you like to hear what you said about handling two problems? The maid and the mother who was starting to suspect. Valentina's scream echoed through Villa Castellani, but it could not drown out the truth that was finally coming to light. The recording began to play. Static filled the room at first, crackling and hissing like something alive. Then a voice emerged from the tiny speaker. Slurred. Drunk. Unmistakably Valentina's. You know what is funny? Everyone thinks I am so sweet. So perfect. The beautiful Valentina Morosini who could not hurt a fly. A laugh. High and cruel. Then another woman's voice in the background, barely audible. What do you mean? I mean I have killed 2 people and nobody even knows. Well, technically one was the maid's fault. She should have kept her mouth shut in prison. But the other one? That was all me. The staff stood frozen against the walls. Nanagia had covered her mouth with both hands. Hermano stood like a statue, the color completely drained from his face. That maid, Lucia or whatever her name was, she took the blame for me. Stupid girl actually believed I would help her get out early. My father promised her family money. He promised her a reduced sentence. Instead, we just let her rot. Another laugh, this one darker. She got what she deserved for being so naive. Serafina's jaw tightened, but she did not move. She let the recording continue. And then there was Hermano's mother. That nosy old witch. She started asking questions about a year ago. Found some old newspaper clipping about the accident in Genoa. Started looking at me differently. Asking where I was that night. Asking if I knew the Pharaoh family. The recording crackled. Someone coughed in the background. So I visited her. Told Hermano I was going to surprise her with some flowers. We went for a drive on the cliff road, just the 2 of us. She kept asking questions the whole time. Kept saying she knew I was hiding something. Kept threatening to tell her precious son. A pause. The sound of liquid being poured. A glass clinking. So I grabbed the wheel. Just for a second. Just enough to send the car toward the edge. I jumped out before it went over. Walked back to the main road and called for help. By the time the ambulance arrived, she was already gone. Another giggle. This one made Serafina's stomach turn. Single car accident. No witnesses. Tragic, really. Everyone felt so sorry for poor Hermano. He cried at the funeral. I held his hand and cried too. It was a beautiful performance. The recording ended. Silence filled the room. Heavy. Suffocating. Absolute. Hermano had not moved during the entire recording. He stood perfectly still, his eyes fixed on some point beyond the walls, beyond the villa, beyond anything in this world. His face was a mask of devastation. When he finally spoke, his voice came out broken. Shattered. Like glass that could never be put back together. My mother called me that morning. The words were barely above a whisper. She said she wanted to talk about something important. She said she had concerns about Valentina. She asked me to come home early. A tear rolled down his cheek. He did not wipe it away. I told her I was too busy. I told her it could wait. I told her we would talk at dinner. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. She was dead by dinner. Valentina scrambled to her feet. Her perfect facade had crumbled completely now. Her makeup ran in black streaks down her face. Her hair hung in tangles. Her pink dress was wrinkled and stained with dust from the marble floor. Hermano, that recording is fake. She manufactured it. She paid someone to impersonate my voice. This is all a conspiracy to destroy our wedding. Stop lying. The roar that erupted from Hermano Castellani shook the chandelier above their heads. The crystals clinked against each other in the silence that followed. The staff pressed themselves harder against the walls. Even Serafina took a small step backward. Hermano grabbed Valentina by the shoulders. His grip was not gentle. His eyes burned with a fury that seemed almost inhuman. My mother loved you. She welcomed you into our family. She defended you when her friends said you were too young, too ambitious, too perfect. She called you the daughter she never had. His voice cracked. And you murdered her. You murdered her because she was starting to see the truth. The same truth I was too blind to see. Valentina tried everything in the minutes that followed. She cried. Great heaving sobs that shook her entire body, tears streaming down her face in rivers of ruined mascara. She fell to her knees and begged, clutching at Hermano's legs, promising to change, promising to confess, promising anything he wanted if he would just give her another chance. She offered money. Millions. Tens of millions. She would sign over her inheritance. She would disappear forever. She would do whatever it took to make this go away. She threatened. Her family was powerful. The Morosinis had connections in every level of government. They could destroy Serafina. They could destroy Nanagia. They could make all of this disappear with a single phone call. But nothing worked. Serafina stood motionless through all of it. Her hollow eyes watched Valentina's performance with the patience of someone who had seen it all before. Every manipulation. Every lie. Every desperate attempt to escape consequences. My sister, Serafina said quietly when Valentina had exhausted herself, never got to beg. She died on a cold prison floor, surrounded by strangers, believing that no one in the world cared about her. She called out for me in her final moments. The guards told me she said my name over and over until she could not speak anymore. She stepped closer to Valentina, who flinched backward. I could have killed you. I planned to. For 4 years, every night before I fell asleep, I imagined different ways to do it. A knife. Poison. My bare hands like I tried before. I thought it would bring me peace. I thought it would bring Lucia justice. Her voice dropped to something barely audible. But standing here now, watching you crumble, I realized something. Killing you would not bring Lucia back. It would only mean that you had destroyed 2 Pharaoh sisters instead of 1. Armano had pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking so badly, he could barely press the buttons. Security. I need security in the main hall immediately. And call the police. Tell them we have evidence of multiple homicides. Valentina's eyes went wild. No, Armano, please. We can work this out. We can make a deal. My father will pay whatever it costs. Your father's money cannot buy you out of this. Armano's voice was dead. Empty. The voice of a man who had lost everything he believed in. Not this time. There are too many witnesses. Too much evidence. Too much truth. 2 security guards appeared in the archway. They looked confused, uncertain, glancing between their employer and his fiancée who was cowering on the floor. Detain her, Armano said. Do not let her leave this room until the police arrive. Valentina tried to run. She made it 3 steps before the guards caught her arms. She thrashed. She screamed. She cursed Serafina in Italian and English and words that did not belong to any language at all. But there was nowhere to go. As the guards held her, Valentina turned one last time to face Serafina. Her beautiful face was twisted with a hatred so pure it seemed to distort her features into something monstrous. You ruined everything, she spat. Everything I built. Everything I worked for. My entire future, destroyed by some worthless maid's worthless sister. Serafina walked toward her slowly. The staff parted to let her pass, watching in silence as the 2 women who had once shared a prison cell faced each other one final time. Serafina stopped inches from Valentina's face. Her expression was calm. Her voice was steady. But her eyes held something that Valentina had never seen before. Peace. No, Serafina said quietly. You ruined yourself 7 years ago when you decided that your life was worth more than a child's. More than my sister's. More than anyone's. I just made sure the world finally saw what you truly are. She stepped back. The guards tightened their grip on Valentina's arms. My sister used to say that the truth always comes out eventually. She believed in goodness. In justice. In mercy. Even after everything you did to her, she never stopped believing that somehow, someday, things would be made right. A single tear rolled down Serafina's cheek. She did not wipe it away. This is for Lucia. The police arrived within 20 minutes. They came with sirens wailing, lights flashing in the Tuscan dusk. They listened to the recording. They read the original statement. They took statements from every member of staff who had witnessed the confrontation. Valentina Morosini was arrested on charges of fraud, vehicular manslaughter, and second-degree murder. She was led out of Villa Castellani in handcuffs, the same type of handcuffs that had once bound Lucia Ferro's wrists 7 years earlier. The Morosini family's lawyers arrived within the hour. They demanded bail. They threatened lawsuits. They promised to make everyone involved pay for this humiliation. But this time, there was no buying freedom. Too many witnesses had seen the confrontation. Too many people had heard the recording. The story had already leaked to the press, and by morning it would be on every news channel in Italy. Valentina Morosini would face trial. And for once, justice would not be bought. Later that evening, when the police had gone and the lawyers had retreated and the staff had finally been dismissed to their quarters, Serafina stood alone in the villa's garden. The sun was setting over the Tuscan hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. It was beautiful, peaceful, a strange contrast to the chaos that had consumed the day. She stood near the roses. Red ones, deep and lush, growing along an old stone wall. Nonna Gia had told her earlier that Signora Castellani had planted them herself years ago. She had tended them every morning until the day she died. Footsteps approached on the gravel path behind her. Serafina did not turn around. She already knew who it was. Ermanno Castellani stopped beside her. He looked older than he had that morning. Grief had aged him in the span of hours. His eyes were red. His shoulders were slumped. He looked like a man who had lost everything. Because he had. You could have killed her, he said quietly. In that room. No one would have stopped you. Some of them probably would have helped. Serafina did not look at him. She kept her eyes on the roses, watching them sway gently in the evening breeze. I thought about it. Every day for 4 years, I thought about nothing else. I dreamed about it. I planned it. I imagined her face when she realized what was about to happen. What stopped you? She was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. My sister. She turned to face him at last. Her hollow eyes were still hollow, but something had shifted behind them. Something lighter. Something like release. Lucia was gentle. She believed in goodness. In justice. In mercy. Even after everything Valentina did to her, she never became bitter. She never stopped believing that the world could be fair. She used to tell me that revenge was poison. That it would destroy me faster than it would destroy anyone else. She looked back at the roses. If I had become a murderer, Valentina would have taken her from me twice. Once by destroying her body. And once by destroying who I was. I would have spent the rest of my life in prison, just like Lucia did. And everything she believed in would have died with me. Ermanno nodded slowly. He understood. Perhaps better than anyone else could. Where will you go? He asked after a moment. Home. To Florence. My brother has been waiting for me to finish this. We are going to visit Lucia's grave tomorrow. For the first time since she died, I will be able to stand there without shame. Without feeling like I failed her. She picked up the small bag she had brought with her 3 days ago. The same bag. The same clothes. The same woman, but somehow different now. Lighter. Thank you, Ermanno said. For the truth. Even though it destroyed me. Serafina almost smiled. Almost. The truth does not destroy us. Lies do. Your mother knew that. That is why she kept asking questions. That is why Valentina had to silence her. She began walking toward the garden gate. Her footsteps were steady. Unhurried. The footsteps of someone who had finally finished a journey that had lasted far too long. Behind her, the staff watched from the windows. The cook who had been slapped for cold coffee. The gardener who had been screamed at until he wept. The butler who had nearly been hit by a flying plate. Young Chiara, the maid who had dropped the vase, the girl whose punishment had started everything. They would never cower again. Nonna Gia called out from the doorway. Serafina. She paused at the gate and turned. The old woman stood in the fading sunlight, her weathered face streaked with tears that she made no effort to hide. Her hands were clasped in front of her, trembling slightly with age and emotion. Lucia would be proud, Nonna Gia said. What you did today. How you did it. She would be so proud. Serafina's composure finally cracked. Just for a moment. Just enough for one tear to roll down her cheek. She had not cried since the night Lucia died. She had told herself that tears were weakness, that grief was a luxury she could not afford until justice was done. But now, standing in the Tuscan sunset with the weight of 4 years finally lifting from her shoulders, she allowed herself that one tear. Thank you, she whispered. Then she walked through the gate, into the golden light of evening, carrying nothing but her bag and her truth. Behind her, Villa Castellani breathed freely for the first time in years. The terror that had hung over its halls had been broken. The monster that had worn the mask of beauty had been unmasked and dragged away. The staff began to move again. To speak again. To laugh again, tentatively at first, then with growing relief. Chiara was already smiling through her tears, hugging Benedetta the cook, promising that things would be different now. Ermanno remained in the garden as the last light faded from the sky. He stood among his mother's roses, touching the petals gently, remembering her face, her voice, her love. She had tried to warn him. She had seen through Valentina when no one else could. And she had paid for that clarity with her life. I am sorry, Mama, he whispered to the roses, to the sky, to wherever she might be now. I should have listened. I should have come home when you asked. The evening breeze stirred the petals. It almost felt like a response. Like forgiveness. He would rebuild. He would honor his mother's memory. He would make sure that Villa Castellani became a place of kindness, not cruelty. A place where staff were treated with dignity. A place his mother would have been proud of. And somewhere far away, beyond the hills and the olive groves and the winding roads of Tuscany, a gentle girl named Lucia Farrow finally rested in peace. Because her sister had kept her promise. She had told the truth. And the truth had set them both free.